Thanks for joining me for another episode of History Over Coffee. Am I a punk rocker? Yes. Am I a metalhead? Yes. Do I like things all rock from 80s, 90s, and beyond? Yes. Do I like the classic rock? Yes. Do I like the 60s and 70s rock, hippie rock? Yes. So that is what I'm trying to show you here, is all my musical influences and go from where I started musically, including drums and maybe some other things going on that I might throw in and remember about. So it's cool because I have friends from a long time ago watching this video and remembering and laughing along with me and calling me up or texting me or whatever. Hey, it was a great video and I remember that. Or in my own daughter, my own family doing the same kind of thing. So and also I like it because my daughter says, hey, this gives me real insight into you, Dad. So, and she's in her 30s now, so she understands. So that is the intro of what this is all about. You notice the shirt I'm wearing. And if you saw a couple of the videos that I made previously, I may have understated what a fan I was of Rush. Back then in the early 80s, you know, All the World's a Stage, 2112, Caress of Steel, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, Signals. I had all those albums, listened to them all the time, and I thought they were great. Another band that I didn't mention before, but it was a big deal for me back then, was Blue Oyster Cult. Now, I did get tired of Don't Fear the Reaper because they played that over and over on the radio. But Godzilla and Astronomy and all their other stuff, I love Blue Oyster Cult as well. Probably my last year of high school, and maybe beyond that, I started working at this restaurant as a busboy, you know, cleaning up tables, stocking dishes, bringing clean glasses, you know, out there to the bar or whatever. And so I'm stocking the bar, right, with glasses, and you know, I would talk to the bartender every now and then. We'd talk music and stuff like that. And he had heard from other people, oh yeah, you don't know that Rich plays drums too. And so in the bar part of the restaurant, they would have live bands play. And I don't remember what day of the week this was, or if they even had it on the weekends. But what I can tell you is he kept trying to get me to go up there on stage to play with these bands, you know. And I was like, no, man, you know, I'm on the clock. Oh no, I'll talk to the manager about it. But one particular night, you know, they let me go jam with the band. You know, obviously I was much younger than the rest of them. I think I was 18 at the time and they were, I don't know, whatever. But so, you know, it's like, what songs you know? You know this song, you know that song? And most of these bands are playing like pop music, you know, some mainstream rock songs and stuff, dance music, of course. So I don't know how we decided on this, but we played Eric Clapton, Cocaine. And they let me do a little drum solo in between there. And of course they were joking, of course. They're, oh yeah, drummer, you're about to get fired, you're about to lose your job because this 18-year-old kid is gonna take your job. So that went to my head a little bit, I guess. So I wish it wouldn't have. So one thing led to another, and I, you know, you used to go to music stores, and you know, now you have Craigslist and you go online if you want to find a band or whatever. But back then you go to music stores and people had those little flyers set out and you pull off the phone number if you want to call. So it didn't say what genre, it didn't say what it was, it just says band looking for drummer. So not knowing what I was getting into, I go over and try out for these guys. And it turns out it was country music. And they played a couple top 40 songs, which I knew, but I had no clue on the country music. So they're like, well, all right, man, well, go learn these songs and come back. Well, long story short, I didn't learn the songs. And I went back, and that's where I learned, if you're gonna do anything, you better be prepared for it. So they were like, it's not gonna work out, man. We want a country drummer, and I just wasn't it. So working at that place, we'd hang out after work because I usually worked like 5 to close or 6 to close, whatever. And so we'd hang out after work sometimes. Sometimes in a parking lot, or sometimes it was elsewhere. But occasionally, people would come over to my house and want to jam. Now, of course, my parents were home. That was a no-go because I was still living at home at the time. But one thing that job helped me do was upgrade my drum set, because I was like, here I have this Slingerland Pearl hodgepodge drum set where I had to tie string and electric tape to keep the toms from falling down. That's how piss poor this drum set was. So I was like, I got a job now. I can try to upgrade. So after seeing and listening to drummers that played Tama drums, like, Stuart Copeland and Dave Holland from Judas Priest, and Clive Burr from Iron Maiden. After seeing these people play Tama drums, I was like, I want to get Tamas. And then I went to my local music store, and I realized how expensive Tama drums were for the first time. So then I go to Don's Music Center, Fairfield, Ohio. That was the music center back then in our town. Now, I probably could have gone to Cincinnati or whatever, but I remember we'd go to Don's Music Center, and I would always be in awe of the Tama drum set. And it was also there that I started buying Modern Drummer magazine and started reading that stuff and seeing about different drummers, Steve Gadd and drummers like that were on the magazine all the time, and started learning a little bit more about drums. And so Don's a pretty cool guy. Him and the other employees, which is only a couple of them, didn't mind if I sat down there and jammed, as long as there was no other customers in there. So one day he said, hey man, Rich, that we do in the back have some used drums, if you're interested. So I went back there, and one that caught my eye was a black 5-piece drum set. Rogers was the brand. Now, these drums still were low end. You look on the inside of the shell, and it was more like pressed board, or particle board, than it was real wood shells. So it was still cool. And the hardware, really, it wasn't that great, because you'd had like a tom rack, and you try to tighten it down, and it seemed like it wouldn't tighten all the way. Still much better than the set that I had before. So I was like, yeah, man. So I don't know how much that I actually paid for them, but I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure it was way less than $500. And so I was able to take that home. Here, my first real drum set. So I wanted to sit down and play it all the time, right? So, and I had a real hi-hat with real hi-hat stand. I had some leftover cymbals, from that old kit that I kept. Some of my stands weren't the greatest, so I had to go back to Don's and upgrade when I had the money to do that. So, yeah, first real drum set, Rogers. Rogers set, I never forget, I still have this cymbal, but it was a Zildjian, and you couldn't tell, it didn't have the big black stamp on it like the ones that are made today. You could just tell by the small etching, which says Zildjian, Turkish symbols, all that. But the problem was, it was keyholed, and if you're not familiar with that, that means it's not a complete circle in the center, which means the center of the stand has worn it out, so it looks more like a keyhole than a perfect circle. But I still have that cymbal, and I still kept it because that's from my old set. It's kind of remembrance from that. But anyway, so we get to jam. I got a real drum set. I'm inviting people over to jam all the time, whether it's workmates that say, hey, I play guitar, or it's, you know, people that I used to jam with before. So from these various jam sessions that we would have at whatever time of day or night, ended up getting my first serious girlfriend. Yeah, she came over to watch us jam, and that's how it happened. You know, there were other girls that came over, but most of them were with their boyfriends or something like that. So that's how that happened. And so that was going all well and good and everything with our jam sessions, except for, you know, I don't know what it was, but back then, you know, I alluded to our neighborhood being an older neighborhood built in the 50s and 60s. You know, here we are in the 80s. Mostly families there. The cops were called on us all the time, is what I'm trying to tell you. Whether it be earlier on a skateboard ramp and there'd be kids skating out in the street, you know, grinding curbs or whatever. Look at the long-haired kids, or a kid with orange spray-painted hair. It wasn't me, you know, calling the cops on us. And then our ramp, you know, ramp downstairs, it was a wooden ramp, so it was noisy. Plus, to hear the music over the ramp noise, we'd have to blast the stereo, right? So we got cops called on us a lot. And so anything that would go down at that house, you know, it would be the cops. And my parents were such upstanding citizens, you know, they both were school teachers. So we're like, why are we always getting the cops called on us, you know? And of course it was mine and my brother's fault mostly. But what's funny about that is fast forward to, you know, decades later, when I'm living in California and I set up my drums in my garage, and then one day, you know, I'm playing, I'm jamming, you know, kind of like I do now when I make my videos that loud, and waved to my neighbor, and I mentioned something like, hey, sorry about the drum noise and stuff. She's like, oh no. She walked up to me and says, oh no, we like it. We say, oh, there's that guy playing drums again. Let's go listen. And that just freaked me out because, you know, back, you know, years ago, you get the cops called on you for much less back in Ohio. So I was thinking, is this a California thing, or is this just times have changed, or, you know, something? But, you know, that was kind of fun and interesting to hear. And my neighbors here, I haven't had any complaints so far, but I do watch the times that I play or crank up the volume. And I have mute pads too when I want to practice, but I'll get into that later. You know, my brother Brian would probably say, of course, Rich, you know darn well why the cops are getting called. Of course, he'd blame me. To this day, probably it's my fault. And our parents, it was when they weren't home usually. So moving on, I talked a little bit in History Part 3 about our band, okay? And this still was some of the best group that I played with, and this is back in the 80s. It was my brother, lead guitar, lead singer, Mike Sullivan on bass, and also great singer, and this guy Martin Daffner, keyboards, also played some guitar, great singer as well. I didn't have a microphone. So they started jamming. Here I am, when we started playing, I was a senior in high school. They were freshmen, okay? It was, getting ready to be sophomores. And we continued that up until I was getting ready to join the Air Force. So we would get together a lot and jam, and then, yeah, we called ourselves, we had different names we want to come up with, but I told you before, I used to read a lot of skateboarder magazines. Well, then skateboarder, something happened with the publishing, or they wanted to be not just skateboarding, they wanted to be snowboarding and fashion and all this other stuff. So they changed the magazine name to Action Now. And there's a article in there every month called The Action Zone, and it was like an interview with one of the skaters or snowboarders or music, I don't know. Somehow they were like, let's call ourselves the Action Zone. And so, or AZ, A to Z. So that was the name of our band. And like I told you, Mike on the phone the other day corrected me. We did not play anything by the Byrds. We played the Yardbirds, For Your Love. And we played Led Zeppelin rock and roll. We played, you know, a lot of songs that he reminded me that we played. And then once in a while, just he and I would piddle around with a Rush song or an Iron Maiden song. But we did play Judas Priest Hot Rockin'. And I loved it. I loved playing it. It wasn't anything like what we were playing in the band, but I had an awesome time jamming with those guys. You know, my girlfriend would come over and watch us play. She was a big supporter of us back then. And my friend Mike mentioned to me, he's like, are you really going to go on and talk about the mid-'80s stuff? Because there was a lot that you didn't cover. And after talking to him, I was realizing that that's true. So I just wanted to patch some things in here and just talk about that and, you know, drummer influences and some other things to summarize. So yeah, now next time I will move on to kind of mid-'80s and when I joined the military and my life changed forever on that, and talk about getting more into punk and into metal and that kind of stuff, and some of the influence I had when I first got stationed down in Texas. All right, thank you for watching the Rich Raw Dog Drums channel. Thank you for staying with me, and I hope you enjoy. Take care.